It's just like church and school. Nobody wants the front row. You got demoted to the second row. I appreciate you.
I told them you don't bite.
Yeah, we'll see how the meeting goes.
Well, I also told you to get your rabies shot.
Oh, okay. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. For those who don't know, I'm David Nabel. I'm the city administrator for City of Zion. I see a lot of new faces out there, it's fantastic. This beats my normal 4 to 6 that I have for these dollars and cents series. So appreciate you all coming out. Appreciate everyone who got the word out, invited somebody to come. I love seeing this. There's been a lot of buzz online about the CEJA grant and the funds and what that's going to do for our taxes. A lot of information, a lot of misinformation, a lot of incomplete information. So that's why we wanted to hold this series here tonight. So for those that don't know, Dollars and Cents is a series I started, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, something like that, because there was a lot of questions that people had, but they didn't always either have the time, availability to kind of learn and understand this stuff. So I would pick topics of interest and just explain why the city does what we do. I like to make sure there's always a reason for what we do, and if not, that's a problem. But those reasons don't always get communicated out to the public. So this series was set up for that purpose, for a chance to just kind of sit down. Usually we have it at a coffee shop or a restaurant or something, but this would be a little challenging for like, it's all good, but it's intended to be very informal discussion, questions, things like that. So might be a little challenging with a bigger group, but we'll do our best here. So how many of you are familiar with the CEJA grant? At least on the surface. Fantastic. Going to give a very brief history on how we got here. 1998 nuclear power plant, which is no longer there. Was always a fixture growing up on the beach. It was in all our family pictures in the background. But, that closed in 1998, and they were paying about $19 million a year in property taxes to all the taxing bodies. And when I say the taxing bodies, it's not just the city, it's the elementary school, park district, library, the high school, College of Lake County. There's probably about 10 different taxing bodies. But that $19 million property tax bill went away, but it didn't go away from the cost of operations. That $19 million got shifted to be the burden of residents and businesses. So we saw tax rates skyrocket for anyone who was here at that time. You probably, unfortunately, remember it. I think we saw a 135% increase in property taxes at that time. Fast forward to 2010, housing crisis, where houses were going, there were 3-bedroom houses, 2 3-bedroom houses going for $20,000 here in town. Because people were walking away from them, people couldn't afford them. And we had a lot of outside landlords across the country buying up 30, 40 home blocks at those prices. So values crashed down, which again caused our tax rates to go through the roof. Double whammy, just as we were recovering. So when the plant closed, the plan was to move all of that nuclear waste to Yucca Mountain out in Nevada. Plug gets pulled on Yucca Mountain. They don't have a place to put the nuclear waste permanently. So leave it where it is. Well, that wasn't the deal. That was not the plan. We do not want to be a nuclear storage site. If we're going to be one, though, we said we should be compensated. And this was 13 years ago. The city started working. We saw an act called the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982. And it said that communities that serve as interim storage sites should be compensated for the social and economic impact of being a storage site. So the city looked at that and went, hey, let's try, and there's already a bill passed out there. We should be getting this, we're a storage site. We were told we don't need the definition of an interim storage site. That's supposed to be a site that's licensed, where it's gonna be moved temporarily before a final place. We're the temporary storage until there's a final place, but that didn't meet the definition. So we started a long journey with all the other taxing bodies helping support the costs of basically lobbying and pushing to try and get a bill passed federally to make it eligible for us to get that 15 million a year. Okay, and we entered into an intergovernmental agreement saying, when we get that $15 million a year, we'll share it out proportionally based on our tax bills, because we all lost that tax base. Everyone should benefit from it. 10 years of work trying to get that federal bill passed. Never went anywhere. You know where we're at with challenges in federal government, so it's not surprising. But in the meantime, ComEd was looking for a bailout, probably in, it was early 2021. They were looking for a bailout for some of their plants down south. They have 2 plants down south, Byron and, okay. We sent an email, I sent an email to our legislators at the time and said, don't think about passing a bailout for them without putting something in there for the mess they left behind. So Joyce Mason, and at the time Representative Sam Yingling, took that very seriously. And we had a meet, they came up and had a meeting with in Mayor McKinney's office trying to brainstorm, how can we tackle this? How can we get that in there? So let them play the politics of all that behind the scenes, but we drafted legislation and we drafted language trying to say, we need something here before you pass money there. And they came through. There was a group of legislators that said, we're not approving the bill, the CJA Act, which includes the bailout, unless Zion's in there for being a storage site. And it got passed. So we were amazed, because it was kind of one of those things like we weren't looking for, but we paid attention, took a shot in the dark, and it went through. So we were on it was like 10 or 11 at night, that when they were on the floor on the phone, when she was calling us and letting us know it passed. So, fantastic. Now what? Getting money from the state's a tough thing. So the CJA Act finally passed, which stands for Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. So we're part of that. Let me back up one second. There's 2 things we got into that bill. One is the $15 million a year for 23 years. That goes to the Zion taxing bodies. The second thing, which I probably won't see in my lifetime, but hoping, looking to the future, we got that nuclear spent fuel is to be assessed as real property, not personal property. So those spent fuel rods can go on the tax bill and assessed value. Right now they're a liability, they're junk. But there's 95% energy still left in those rods. And internationally, they're finding additional uses for that energy, recycling that, using second-gen power plants, things like that. At some point, those rods are gonna have significant value. We got that in the bill now, that when they do, if they're still here, we can tax them. That'd be a huge add to the tax base. May never come, but we like the idea. It could be huge in the future. So September 21, CJA passes. We start having discussions with Illinois DCEO, Department of Commerce and Economic Development. That's the grant arm of the state. So the state passed the legislation and they said, hey, DCEO, write the grant agreement, take it, go from there. So they contact us, and we were on a call with Joyce Mason, and they were basically asking us, how do you want this done? And we told them our plan, that taxes were a big challenge for our community, and that this was kind of meant to undo when all that tax burden was shifted to the public to reel some of that back. They said, well, we can't write tax reduction into the grant agreement. It's not a permitted use. And we went, okay, well, that's a bummer. But they said it doesn't have to be new expenditures that you're using these funds for. So if we were doing $2 million a year in street improvements, and we already had that in our budget, we could say, I want the $2 million from the grant to do that, and now I've freed up $2 million, and they said, you can do whatever you want with that. And we went, okay. And then they said, do you want this going to the city, or how do you want this, happening? And at the time, we looked at it and we said, our levy was about 8.2 million a year, and the grant was 14.5. We said, well, we can't reduce, even if we reduced our entire levy of 8.5 million, that would reduce people's property taxes about 15%. Great, but there's 14.5 million on this grant. We want a bigger bang for that buck. So, kind of following the model that we were looking at with the federal thing, we said, put all of the taxing bodies in there proportionate to the tax bill, okay? So that everyone benefits from it, and then we'll work behind the scenes on saying, let's see what we can get for tax reduction. We've been talking about it as a group for a while, and they said, okay, we'll do that. So it took them from September, the state, from September of 21 to May of 23 before we got our notice of funding opportunity, a NOFO we call it. So when you hear about this was passed in 21, what have we been doing with the money? We didn't even get the grant application until May of 23. Then we have going through the grant process and everything, and then everyone's trying to figure out how to do this in the first year of this, and we had tons of meetings about how to write the application, making sure it gets used, all that stuff. Not until probably, at least for the city, it was February of 24 when we finally got the final rules from the state on here's how to use the funds, here's the requirements, here's all that. And we had already been spending the money because they said it's a reimbursement grant. So we're like, okay. They said you can start spending money in July of 23. Okay, we don't really have all the money, but we start spending, we don't get reimbursed on that until about a year later. So now we're up to July 24 of 2024, getting our first reimbursement from the act that was passed in 21. So it's a great thing, and it's a huge win for the community, but there is lag time here, so people need to understand that as well. Some taxing bodies, and Robin Smith, our library director, is back in the corner, haven't even got their reimbursements yet, unless you've gotten it since we
We've
talked.
gotten portions, we're still waiting on some, but.
Okay.
Yeah, we've gotten some.
Yeah, so this is from the first round, and it's a 23-year grant, but all during that time they go, let's do year 2. And we went, okay, but we're still trying to sort this out, but we had another meeting with UCEO, and we said, here's our challenges in the first round, can we tweak this? We were talking about tax abatement, and there were discussions on, there were differences of opinion on how much and what to use it for and all that stuff. So we said, okay, can we revisit this, look at trying to write in something for tax reduction? They said again, they doubled down, we can't put it in the grant, but use it however, for freeing up the funds. Basically the same thing they said first round. So we said, okay, we proposed, and we went around and talked to all the tax advisors, and we said, okay, can we change the allocation percentages? And that's when we were talking about maybe saying, rather than proportional to tax bills, it was proportional to economic development growth, of which every taxing body has a role in to varying degrees, because businesses look at labor pools, which come from population, housing, the skills of students. They look at quality of life, maybe crime, infrastructure, all these different pieces. So we put all that together and said, can you reallocate? They said, well, we can, but we need everybody on board with that. So, to be fair, this was like very last minute. This was like at the end of May of 24, and they're like, we need to do the notice of funding opportunity by June. So I met with all the taxing body staff and said, can we do this? And it was just too fast to get through and try. Some said yes, some said no, we're still trying to sort this out. We said, okay. So second round comes out, which we're still in the process. I haven't heard back from them yet on approval for the second round, but there is correspondence going around. So we're in 2025, trying to get the second round going from 2023. But in the meantime, we work with Joyce Mason to say, okay, we keep hearing tax reduction or tax abatement is not a permitted use under this grant. DCEO keeps telling us that's how we interpret the legislation, which is silent to that. What can we do about that? And so she started making calls and paying attention to what was going on, and working with Senator Marietta Allen on the Senate side. And they said, let's just put it in the language, let's amend the language to say it has to be used for tax abatement. So this was all, what was it? How many weeks ago was this? It was like a month ago, if that. So they were in lame duck session, and Representative Mason calls me and goes, yeah, I don't think we're gonna be able to get anything done. We only do like 3 or 4 things during lame duck session, and dealing with CJA is not gonna be one of them. However, on a Sunday, she was down in Springfield and somebody there was walking by and said something about cleaning up an energy bill. And Joyce went, what did you just say? So there was one of the items that was gonna be on there, somebody else was looking to clean up an energy bill, and she goes, I've got something I'd like to add to that. So literally from Friday night saying, yeah, we're not gonna be able to get it done, to a call on Sunday, to it getting on the floor of the Senate on Monday and House on Tuesday, language got added that 75% of these funds are required to be used for abatement. Okay. And abatement is a fancy word for saying we have to give back taxes on our levies. We have to reduce that up. So the taxing bodies won't be out the money by reducing the levies, because we're gonna get that from the grant. And then the additional 25% of those funds is to use for infrastructure and things that we all need. So we looked at it and said, okay, we're hurting from the impact of increased costs and services and stuff, just like everybody else, but we're not gonna use all of that for those purposes. We need to address taxes, because one of the big challenges the city's had in attracting businesses and residents is those taxes. They go, especially being on the border of Wisconsin, there's like 3 or 4 large businesses up there that said we would have been here if it wasn't for your tax rates. So for us to be able to improve property values, your home values, for people to be able to afford housing, to bring in the jobs and the amenities and new tax base, we have to get that under control. And that's been one of our big focuses. That's why we've worked on this for 13 years, to try and get it going. And we're finally seeing the results of that. You won't yet. And that's what I wanna hit. And again, this is just a start of the work. Like, we're committed to this. We're not done with this, because even with this tax abatement, we're probably about 35% higher than we should be. So there's more work to be done. We're not done. But the way taxes work is, now this got passed in January saying you have to use 75% for abatement. Now they're, again, figuring out how to write that into their grants and how that's gonna work and how we're gonna get the money, because we don't wanna abate, not have the money, and then wait 2 years for the state to reimburse us. So we're working on that. But even if they said, here's the money, abate, we're gonna front load you this, which is what we're trying to work on, that would be on the December 25 levy, which you won't see until the tax bills that come out in 26. Okay, So that's the other piece I wanted to make sure we hit is managing the expectations of this. It's not a, you got a grant, we get $15 million and a check's gonna go out to everybody. This is the tax levy process and how the tax bills work. It'll be going through that whole process. So it's gonna take time to see that. But there'll be about 10.8 million of abatement if all the entities use the funding, apply for the funding, receive it, and do the 75% that's in the legislation. It'd be about $10.8 million of abatement, which for Zion proper, like Zion Elementary School District orders, could be about a 15 to 20% reduction in your taxes, which is huge. You know, if you're paying $5,000 in taxes a year, you know, you might be looking at $1,000 reduction. Yeah.
So you had 2 rounds, give or take, where you got $15 million, give or take. Okay, that you have not been able to give us a tax break, which I totally understand. Okay. How is that money being spent then, since you can't give it to us as a tax?
So we haven't received 15 million yet for each of those. We've been allocated that. That's what I was saying, the first round, so this, and I'm gonna speak for the city because that's what I'm here for. Our share of the allocation is about $2 million, okay? So the first year, the application we did was, we had construction, we had facilities, we had an engine, fire engine, we were replacing a 20-year-old fire engine. Those were all eligible expenses under the grant. So we applied for that. Those were things we were gonna buy already. So we applied for that. By the time it went through the process, we got $1.5 million of the $2 million so far from the state. And then what we just did in December was we said, we're gonna reduce, when we pass our levy, we're gonna reduce our levy $1 million. So we took 2/3 of what we had received and already reduced our levy. So that won't be effective until, though you should see that part on the 2025 bills from the city. But we're only 15% of the tax bill. And that is, on average, you might see the city's portion go down like $80. You probably won't see it. And that's been another big part of this, is like, to make an impact, it has to be a collective effort.
Then how was the rest of the money distributed on the first go?
Based on the applications from each of those taxing bodies.
Right, but did they take all the money? Was all the money spent?
I don't watch their finances to know what they've spent it on, but they've applied for all the funds.
Okay.
Yes, so they've applied for all the funds for infrastructure improvements, facilities improvements. There was a construction project at the library that they did that they utilized the funds for. The Park District did some stuff at the Leisure Center, and then the old Shiloh Center by the lagoon. And then some of the stuff, they used it for, I think, some of the matching funds on their park improvements. But again, like, we're still, the reimbursements from that first round are still trickling in. We haven't spent any money from the second round yet because we just applied for it this probably 3 or 4 months ago. So we don't have anything on the second round, but that's gonna be going for the city. What we applied for is we're trying to build Station 2 out on Lewis Avenue. Fire Station 2 is falling apart. We're looking to construct a new station rather than put $3 million into remodeling and improving an old one. We had already budgeted for some of that, but if we can use the grant funds, then that frees it up. And again, we can look then, when we get that money, at reducing our levy. So, does that?
All right, so now, round 3,
Yes.
which is what we're gonna be able to really see where the money is, how is that gonna affect your budget? Because now 75% of it is coming back to us.
So what's gonna happen is, we passed our levy, it was like 8.1 million this past round. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, okay, we need to, of the 2 million that we're gonna get allocated, we need to abate 1.5 million. Okay, so we're gonna say, hey, don't put $1.5 million on your tax bills, on the community's tax bills. So we're not gonna collect that money from the public, but we're gonna get it reimbursed from the grant. So it's a net wash for us financially. And then the other 500,000 is what we have to say, facilities, equipment, infrastructure, the things that the grant, the eligible uses of the grant for that piece. So the plan is to use that funding to replace lost tax revenue to the taxing bodies that we're not collecting from the public anymore.
So what happens after 23 years?
Then, yeah. So the plan
Thank you.
is reduce the taxes during this time so that we can attract businesses, so that we can become self-sufficient, grow our tax base, because we haven't been able to, because taxes are so high, we haven't been able to grow that tax base. It's actually it was dwindling there.
Right.
So if we build that tax base, as that funding goes away, we've replaced it with being able to be competitive on a level playing field.
But the rods are gonna still be there.
I don't have a magic 8 ball for what the federal wants to do
Well,
with
since
that.
I've
Now,
been here, since I've been 11, the rods
Yeah.
are gonna still be there.
now the way we addressed this, and I don't know if any of you saw it, but there was a cops community group did an interview with us, and I think they asked that question. Joyce Mason was there at the time, and she's talked with some of the legislators, and again, she can only speak for herself. She doesn't know who's gonna be in those chairs in the future, but they agree that the way the language is written is it's not a sunset date.
Okay.
CJA itself, the Climate Equitable Jobs Act, has a 23-year period. However, it's written in the language that we will receive these funds as long as the rods remain there. So that's gonna be a fight for whoever, if they say, yes, we're not doing this funding anymore because it's sunsetted, that'll have to be a fight to say, no, that's not what the language means, or they'll have to renew it or extend it or whatever. Just a second, Kathy.
So simply put, we won't see anything on our tax bill till 26 for the 25 bills. Either our bills will stay the same, hopefully, or go down, but we won't see a benefit of this until 26 when the 25 bill will come out. Is that correct?
Yeah, the bills that you get in 26,
Right,
that'll be
for
due in June and
25.
September
Yes.
of
Okay.
26 will reflect
Right,
the
okay.
recent language change.
Okay, okay.
So don't spend no money.
Yeah, I'll try.
Where is this perpetual language written?
It's in the CJ Act, it's in the amended language that we have in there.
Okay, so the new bill has it.
Yeah, the old bill had it too. The old bill, the only thing that changed in the new bill is the 75% for abatement, but in the original language, it did say that we'll continue to receive the funds until the federal compensates us. So if the feds come through and compensate us, the state goes away. So whatever we receive from Fed goes against that 15 million from the state, or the rods no longer are here. So that was the language in the bill as it relates to that. Brandon?
So if the Fed would say, let's say, we're saying 15, so if the Fed would only do 10, would the state still give us the other 5?
Yes, yes. So the plan, the intent was to make us whole, but not double dip. So,
What happens if they move the rods? Will we lose the funding?
yes. Yeah.
Will we lose the funding right away, or?
I'm fine, we'll figure it out. I'd rather not have rods here.
Well, we're not gonna get reimbursed for all the time we've had them in the past?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just going forward.
yeah, they're not gonna move the rods, but.
Yeah, nobody's gonna, they were dealing with Yucca Mountain for 50 years before they pulled the plug, and I spoke on a panel for the Nuclear Energy Institute, and the Secretary of the Department of Energy at the time was there, and they said, we're not even looking at permanent solutions right now. So it took them 50 years to look and pull the plug on Yucca Mountain, and they're saying they're not even starting to look, they're looking at potential interim places, but that's a whole nother fight, and that's a whole nother story, but.
Since this moves glacially, Would it be possible to put something on probably the finance page on the city website that's just a little recap? You know, this was applied for, this much is approved, this is when you'll see it, so folks can pull it up and say, oh, they applied for 2 million, they got the 2 million, and just a little chart of something, so folks can call and just kind of look at it, and update it then as it, you know.
My plan was to put together like an FAQ page on it, but I wanted to know what the FAQs were, so that's what you're on my guinea pigs on this tonight, to find out what, because I've been so in this for so long, like things that I've lost sight of what the general questions might be, because I've been lost in the details, so this is very helpful. Okay.
Yes, where are the CEJA funds coming from? Is this state money?
It's just state money,
Not coming from federal?
it's not passed through.
Is there any way the new administration, the new federal administration, with their disdain for the environment, can affect this?
No.
Thank you.
This is a state appropriation as part of their annual budget, and only from state funds. Any other questions? I know I threw a lot at you there.
When I read the surrounding bodies, would the harbor or beach park, any of their taxes be affected?
Good point. I started touching on that and got sidetracked. Something shiny. But, so Zion Elementary School boundaries, so if Zion Elementary School is on your tax bill, those boundaries will see the biggest, the 15 to 20%. Beach Park Elementary School, which is basically west of Lewis, you'll probably see a 10% reduction, and then surrounding areas, Wadsworth, Winthrop Harbor, Beach Park, because of the Zion Benton Township, or the library and the high school, probably a 3 to 5% on those. So it's kind of a ripple effect, but.
Would their property taxes go down too then, or stay the same, or it's just
What was that?
property taxes for the harbor or beach park? Would they?
I don't know, that
Okay.
depends on the individual levies of
Okay.
each of the taxing bodies, so.
But the time frame will be the same though, 20.
The time frame would be the same.
Yeah, that's not gonna change.
No.
Yeah, 42% of households in Zion are renters. What benefits will they see?
That's a civil issue between leases and the owners, like, I don't know what their contracts, if they're, some leases, they're responsible, the tenant's responsible for property taxes and utilities. Some, the landlords might just gobble up the savings. We can't separate out the benefit of those, but we're hoping that, I mean, back when when did we have with Mayor Hill, when did we have that big?
2016.
2016. So at that time we had 1,000 landlords, 1,000 different landlords in Zion. Now there were 3 or 4 that made up 50% of our rentals, but a lot of the rentals were people that lived here, that they had their family home, they moved somewhere else, but they're renting it out. They cared about and took care of their places. So I'm all for benefiting, renters and property owners here. I'm hoping, this is optimistic and probably unicorn and fairy dust, that rents will be reflective of savings, but I doubt that. But that's up to individual landlords.
Could you tell our audience here about the change from the rental to owner perspective over the last 6 years?
Yeah, so I mentioned that back in 2010, we had groups from Arizona, Texas, Florida, just coming in and grabbing, 20, 30, 40 homes in Zion because they were buying them for $20,000. What happened, and the reason that that's a problem is a healthy community is about 27 to 33% rental. We were 60% at that point. And that creates a huge burden on schools, additional services. Again, renters aren't the problem, it's just the number of them. And that was double to triple what a healthy community was. So what was happening is they were buying these houses and then they were getting their rents. They might not have even been paying taxes because by the time it went for tax sale at the county, it was 3-4 years down the road. So they're like, okay, I made my money. I bought the house for $20,000. go ahead, sell it, I'll buy the one next door now because that property value went down. And it created this spiral effect. So we really focused on trying to get a handle on homeownership, rental population, and getting those property values up so that they were good investment properties, not just cash flow investment properties. So we implemented some things in the building department and citywide to really focus on that, and it's flipped. So we're at 40% rental now, 60% homeownership. So that's been a huge change for us. So there's a lot of priorities that we are all juggling at once while we're doing this. So there's no magic solution, one thing fixes all, but all these pieces kind of play together for the vision and the goal for the community. So, but the tax relief is a huge one for us because we just see that as one of the biggest challenges and hurdles to overcome. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that the improvements in the park district and some of the schools were probably being subsidized by these monies, maybe, by these levies, okay? Which is great. But I was wondering, who controls, this is a personal thing, the bike paths? Because I would like to see improvements on the bike paths, because they haven't been improved upon in years.
Yeah, and that's the county. I know you've been working with them a lot on that,
Okay.
but so my goal on this piece now is because while we focus on the big 6 local taxing bodies, Lake County, Forest Preserve, the Mosquito Abatement District, like they're all on there and they're all eligible for allocations from this funding too. But I'm gonna be talking with, and Mayor already has, with Gina Roberts and our board officials to say, okay, here's this grant funding, you spend it here and make sure. So those would be some of the things that we want them to focus on.
So you say it's who is it? Who handles that?
The Lake County, the
Lake County?
The Lake County bike path along Galilee. I've been working on one of the county commissions. They're looking at paving that, and for the last 6 years since I've been the mayor, we've been trying to work on getting lighting so that the bike path is safer.
Yeah.
So that it's shoveled during winter so people can enjoy their walks out. So that is something we're focused. The bike path down by Edina, I know the Park District has been working on that extensively, and they had to slow down because they had to have ADA ramps on the sidewalks. I know that slowed it down last year, but that's a work in progress as well.
Would Illinois Beach State Park also be able to take advantage of this grant?
They're not listed on that. It's a state,
Yeah.
they're not a
Just
local
wondering.
property taxing body.
Hey Dave, I want to ask one question about, we've talked a lot about percentages, we've talked a lot about abatements, and what the impact is to the citizen. Would you mind kind of lining out what abatement means, what extension means, what levies
Oh, boy.
mean? I know it's a lot, that's
Yeah.
kind of a loaded question, but there's a lot of confusion when it comes to these terms, and this discussion sometimes gets overshadowed, and I think it's really important.
Yeah, no, I agree, it's very important, and when I was doing the dollars and cents, talking about tax levies and how they work was specifically one of the topics I did. So there's a video out there, I think George actually recorded that one, but on the last dollars and cents, it was an hour and a half almost discussion of how taxes and abatements work. So it is a loaded question, because I'm not gonna keep you all here for an hour and a half. But you hear words levy, abatement, extension, 30,000 foot view. Levy is the amount of money that each taxing body asks for, okay? Abatement says, I'm gonna hold the place of what I asked for, because I might need that down the road, but I'm not gonna collect it all this year, okay? And then the extension is what actually gets collected from the people. So I equate it, I don't even know if people go to Kohl's anymore and stuff, but you used to go to Kohl's and it'd be like, hey, this purse was 50% off, I saved $50. no, you spent half of the amount. That $50 off is the abatement. They're saying, we would like to sell this for $100, we're doing 50% off, and we're selling it for $50. The $50 you pay is the extension, the $50 off is the abatement, the $100 that they want for the sales price is the levy. That it's a lot more complicated than that. There's P-TEL, tax caps, rate caps, all kinds of stuff. But that's,
Nice try.
yeah. It's hard to summarize up, but there's videos out there, and pay attention, because I'll probably be doing another on how tax levies work, dollars and cents session, so.
Yes, earlier you mentioned that you believe economic development belongs to all taxing bodies, and I have to agree with you.
Mhm.
I think we should all participate. What recommendations do you have for the schools for economic development?
I just want them to keep doing what they're doing, driving performance up, driving results up, because that's, when people are looking to buy a house, they go, what's the quality of schools? What's the grade? They might go to the Illinois report card for schools and go, where are they ranked? So, again, people just look at that at its face value. They're not gonna dig into all the whys and ifs and what's happened and, whether the schools have been shorted funds because of the plant closure. They're not gonna care. They're just gonna go, I don't wanna go there because crime or school performance or whatever. So the school's mission by itself fulfills what I'm looking for economic development, other than the contribution to taxes. Those pieces of the levy also impact economic development, so.
Would you consider economic development to be another multi-family rental apartment buildings? Because I saw that, Pleasant Prairie was gonna be putting in one, right across the border, and I just wondered if that's gonna be.
Potentially.
Okay.
It could be, it is an additional drain on number of calls for ambulance. The more people you have, the more calls you have for police and fire, and the more people you have driving on your streets. So it depends on kind of the taxes that come from it, it's economic development because it brings more people, which is more labor pool. And for businesses, that's their big thing right now, is they're having trouble finding the employees. And like West Park across the street, a lot of people were going, hey, the Wisconsin labor market's drained. That's what's preventing some of the development there. We have a good labor pool in Northern Illinois. So that is where we have a little bit of an advantage, even though the taxes are higher. But we need it, so that's where economic development for housing and thing comes in, is labor pool. It's also daytime populations, nighttime populations for restaurants when they decide where they wanna go. So it does have an impact, and I'm not gonna go too much. Colette could do a nice explanation, our township assessor, but there's been some laws changing on the types of rental housing too, and what those contribute to the property tax base, which is not making it as attractive for affordable housing developments, for taxing bodies, because they're getting big property tax breaks now, and it's like, okay, we're taking on all the additional services and demands, and we're not getting the property taxes, but there's still other benefits to that, probably more than you want to know, but.
So that's not what you're looking for?
No, we're looking for industrial is the ideal, because it doesn't have, it's tax base that brings jobs that are gonna shop at our stores, fill up on gas, bring in sales taxes, but not place burdens on the parks, schools, things like that. So it's additional revenue with a minimal impact on services.
Question on taxes, don't we have a hospital here that is for profit? What do we get from City of Hope? I don't mind if I flatten my tires, I've used City of Hope, but I don't understand why we have a for-profit, same like Vista, which has a real problem. What are we getting from City of Hope, except people coming here, there's limited stores, they do stay at their housing, pay very cheaply to stay at that housing next to the chiropractor. What are we getting from it, except they go to All Good? They go to other, I mean, what are we tax-wise?
Tax-wise, property
Nothing.
tax-wise, we get about 4.8 million a year collectively.
Oh, we do, I thought they
Yeah.
were for-profit.
They're in the process of trying to go for a nonprofit.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that, thank you,
So,
okay.
yeah, but
Oh, okay.
we've been contesting that and fighting that.
Right, it was-
Successful at that for now, but we're working with them on
What,
that.
for-profit?
Non-profit,
No, why?
Yeah.
because then we probably don't tax base.
When you
Well,
talk,
that's true, but
can
they'll
you
get the taxes
explain
from
what's
it, though.
included when you talk infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's just kind of a catch-all term, but when we talk infrastructure, I mean, for the city, it's the stuff you don't see, the 100 miles of water mains and sanitary lines buried in the ground. It's the streets, it's the curbs, it's the sidewalks, but then it's also our facilities. So infrastructure for schools their facilities are their largest asset, and that's where they provide all their services. So when we talk infrastructure, it's really brick and mortar type, tangible equipment, sometimes can be included in there depending on who you're asking on the definition. But it's really just all the fixtures, the brick and mortar type fixtures that are all throughout the community, public facilities. Does that make sense?
That is a really great question, and I was just talking to Commissioner Fryerson about this when we start talking about infrastructure, and when we're talking about the buildings and things that we need to improve our community. I said this, one of the most important infrastructure needs that we have and that we have available is our residents. To see people here asking these important questions about the community without you as part of that infrastructure, we don't operate. We do not exist. So your input, your attendance, and having the knowledge of what we're doing, all of us, is what makes our city the city that we want it to be, not the city that people think it is. So you're all a part of I think the most crucial part of our infrastructure, because if the things that we're all doing, the taxing bodies, if we don't have the service and the resources that you need to feel comfortable here, you're probably gonna be less inclined to shop here and stay and do things and buy a home. And that has changed over the last 6 years. And I said this when I was a commissioner of the building and zoning. Our biggest change we had to make was in our property values, because the property values were going up so highly in Wisconsin. Now, if you look at the real estate market here and how it's improved, not only the percentage from rentals to homeowners, but if you sell a house in Zion, if you own a house in Zion now, your property values have gone up because they see attainable, affordable houses here in Zion that they can't buy in Wisconsin now. So we're all a part of the solution to having successful and strong infrastructure in our city.
And to that point, that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure we got across when, one of our big frustrations is everyone goes, the city, fix it, fix it, fix it. We own what we're responsible for, what our mission is. We do some of the things that aren't even within that window, but we look at it, we go, there's 120 employees, give or take, in the city of Zion, but there's 25,000 residents. If improvement's gonna happen in the community, we can't make that improvement as strongly as the public can. So if the community wants if the public wants a better community, we've talked about like just even scooping out the snow from around the fire hydrant, or cleaning off the grates, the garbage and leaves from the grates in front of your house. That stops all the flooding over street and problems. So there are little things that multiplied over 25,000 people could drastically have improvement on the community. So we look at it as a partnership. Like, yes, we will try and address everything we can with our, we have 8 people in our street department that do plowing for the entire, city, and that's about half of what a lot of other municipalities have. we get it done, we figure it out. But any help that could be provided from the public to try and improve, clean up, help with flooding, things like that, goes a long way.
Hey Dave, the mayor, I'm sorry. The mayor brought up a good point. Could you explain what the rate means when your property values go up? What does the rate do, and how does that work? Because there's been a lot of confusion.
Yeah. You just want me to spend an hour and a half talking about tax revenues, don't you?
Try it.
So,
Can I piggyback on his question, and could you incorporate that pie chart into that explanation as well?
yeah. So what Chris is referring to is out in the lobby, there's a pie chart of, you know, the federal government used to have a graph that was like a dollar bill, and it said how much of each of your dollars goes towards defense, towards education, towards all that stuff. So we have out there the breakdown of the tax bill and the percentages that go to the different entities. So that, you know, and again, we all work with each other really well, and we're happy to like refer questions out, things like that. But we'll get questions about park issues or school issues, and it's like, well, we have to do some education, and go, that's a completely separate entity. Some people come from places where it's all under the city, so it's understandable. But here, that tax bill gets divvied up to each of the entities for their services. It doesn't all just come here. So that was more of an educational aid out there for the public. And what Chief Barden was referring to is a tax rate, because a lot of times you'll hear our rate goes up, our rate goes down. The tax levy formula is a 3-part piece. So the levy, like I said, is what we say, we'd love to have this. We ask for $1 million on our levy. To get that, there's all the assessed value of all the property in Zion, which the assessor handles. She doesn't set the values, but it's based on market and what properties are going for. So that value times what percentage gets us $1 million. Okay, so the only thing we have control over is what we ask for, that levy. The property values are what they are, but if I need $1 million and your property is worth $1, we're gonna have 1,000,000% rate. If you're worth $1 million, it goes to 1. So the property values and rates are inversely proportional. As values go up, rates go down. So there was a lot of talk about us having the highest rate in the state 5-7 years ago. Well, we had the lowest property values as well. So it doesn't mean that because you have the highest rate, you're paying the most taxes. You could have a Lake Forest home with a rate of 5 when we were at 15. They were paying $20,000 on their house when $5,000 was being paid here, but we had triple the rate. But their values were also on that property so much more. And that was a big part of the problem, is that like, you don't wanna have a house where your rate's 20% and basically pay for your house in 5 years because the rate's so high. You want a good tax to value amount, and probably more than you want to know, but rates going up and down is not something that tax advisors control. The only thing we control is the levy. Everything else is formulaic based on values.
You might not be able to answer this, but if you are on a senior freeze for the taxes, will they be seeing a decrease in their taxes, or is that gonna really take precedence over the percentage, the discount?
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to run the formula and see how the priority of that happens. I would think they would see a benefit because it's the amount that we collect from everyone. It just might proportionately not be as high, but they should see a benefit. Because if we were trying to get a piece of that $1 million we're asking for, and everyone's paying a higher chunk, but you have a senior freeze paying for this piece, it should all go down. It just might not be as big of a decrease. But we should still be collecting less from them.
what about if you're selling your house after these start coming through our tax assessments? Usually your taxes go up when you're selling a house, the new people. They're still gonna be getting the 20s, how are they gonna figure that out? Or you don't have to know that if you don't.
That's more of an assessment valuation issue, versus like a levy and rate issue.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Yeah, you mentioned the population of 25,000.
just short.
So we haven't quite made home rule status.
We have not. We're 24,600. At 25,000, you get in the state what's called home rule authority. So we exist at the will of the state. Like, we get all of our authority from the state. So they say, this is what City of Zion, this is what you can and can't do. When you hit 25,000, you go to home rule, and they say, and it switches to basically, do whatever you want except these things we say you can't do. So a lot of home rule communities have additional authority for sales taxes, for housing authorities, crime-free housing ordinances, things like that, that we don't have those tools in our toolbox because we're at 24,600. I still think we're over that, but the census, they admitted that they were 3% undercounted in the area, which would have put us at 25.5, but then they're also saying wait till 2030 to fix it. So.
Kathy, that's a great question, and one of the things that a lot of the mayors are doing in the state, I'm on the Illinois Municipal League Board, and we're trying to get the population lower. It's been one of the initiatives for the last 2 years to get the population lower for home rule to be able to benefit the cities that are right at the threshold of home rule. And also, we're also working really hard to get the local government distributed fund increased. It was at 10%, and they reduced it down to 5%, and now it's around 8.2%. And we've been fighting with collaborating with the governor's office to try to get that local government distributive fund back up to 10%, because Lake County pays more taxes, property taxes.
That's income taxes, sales taxes, all of that.
Yeah, so that's something that we've been working on behind the scene with Governor Pritzker's office since I've been in office, and it's been I'd say kind of a contentious issue, but we're continuing to push it.
We only have a few more minutes left for the scheduled time. I'm willing to stay later for anyone who wants to, but.
From the ZB Cops meeting, there's a really good question about the abatement. And why not abate 100%? I know you had an answer, but why not abate 100 instead of 75?
So, the real answer is we've been hit by the costs and the increases as well and haven't been able to keep up with that. We've seen 60% increases in the cost of concrete, street projects. So if we were able to do a mile of street resurfacing before, now we can only do half a mile for the same dollars. So everyone's being hit with the economy, the taxing bodies are no different. So that piece gets us a little bit to work with on catching up with the infrastructure, with the facilities, the deferred maintenance, we call it, that we haven't. To make our budgets fit, a lot of times we go, well, we can wait another year on that street, or we can. So this is, let's get the majority of it as relief to the public, but also we need to make sure that we take care of what we need to continue to provide services to the public, so that we're not in a situation 10 years down the road where we have to keep hiking up things or have big revenue gaps that we have to fit.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to you collectively for all of your hard work on CJ. And I really enjoy your dollars and cents sessions, and I'm glad you're bringing them back.
Yes. Yeah, I'll throw a plug out there. Keep an eye on Facebook and our website for future ones. I try to do one every 3 months or so, but depending on my schedule, it might get pushed a little more than that, but. Sure.
Just a FYI we talked about the first dollars and cents that we were involved with. It was after the mayor and Dave and Representative Mason and Chris and Larry and Roger, we all went to the school to address the issue at that time. And then subsequent to that, we did the first dollars and cents. But that's on the zbcops.com website. So you go to zvcops.com, you'll see, I think, 13 videos. And the first dollars and cents, which is an hour and a half.
Well, that was the first, one of the first ones after COVID, but yeah,
Recording.
yeah, about an hour.
But very informative, extremely informative.
And that's more than you'd ever wanna know about tax levies and
We've
stuff.
been recording all of the school board meetings.
Yeah, thank you, George, he's recording this of his own free time and own equipment and everything, so.
So just to devil's advocate question, what happens if a taxing body doesn't abate the 75%? Or is DCOE still working out the penalties, or, because when I look through the amendment, I don't see any teeth in it.
The details go in that notice of funding opportunity, the requirements, so that's what we're working with them on. I think, and don't hold me to this, but I think the direction we're gonna go is that the taxing bodies will be able to pass basically an abatement ordinance, a certified ordinance. It won't happen until the abatement won't happen until February on the next tax bills, but that will suffice to say, hey, we've done a commitment to abate so that they can get the 75%, but then there'll also be what's called a clawback in there saying, if you don't, the state will recover those funds from the taxing body. I think that's the direction we're gonna go, that everyone's kind of going, okay, that addresses the risks for everyone.
David, I want to commend the city of Zion for stepping up and giving back that $1 million abatement. That was from, what, the previous 2 years of collection?
Well, it was the first year of collection.
The first year.
We
And
haven't
you
had
guys
it, so.
are only collecting 15% on that chart out there. You're giving back $1 million. So if we get the schools to step up and do the high road thing you guys have done, it'll make a big difference. So let's just hope that the schools stand up for that.
I think they will. I think they will. There's been
Well,
good
they have
discussions
to.
with them. Well, for the grantees, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, some have been doing it in the past, different times, different levels, but
But
now
I'm talking
it's
about,
in there now.
but I'm talking about what's already been collected. I want the
Yeah.
schools to give some of that back.
That's up to each board. I
Well, if
can't
they want
speak
to
for
take the
them.
high road, that's what they need to do.
Any other questions before we're over time here? I want to be respectful of that, but I'm available for anyone, even after, if you have questions. And
Do we still get coffee?
well, let's see, there's a Dunkin' Donuts. Thank you again. Have a good, safe night.
Sure.